Picture yourself in a time long gone. The air is warm and smells of salt and dry earth. Before you stands a great city, its walls tall and strong against the sunset. This is Troy. For 10 long years, it has held fast. But tonight, a deep quiet hangs in the air. The usual sounds of the city, the chatter, the clang of metal, the laughter, are gone. It is the quiet before the storm. In a dim room, lit only by a single flickering oil lamp, a woman sits. She is the oracle. Her eyes are closed. She listens to a voice only she can hear. A whisper from the gods. A whisper that will change everything. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breath become slow and deep. We are going to travel back to that last, still hour. We will listen for the whisper that sealed the fate of a legend. Drift back with me now to the final night of Troy. A strange feeling fell over Troy that evening. It was not a sound. It was a lack of sound. The birds stopped singing in the olive trees. The wind, which usually whistled through the stone gates, went completely still. Even the great dogs that guarded the streets lay down quietly, their heads on their paws. It was as if the whole city was holding its breath. The people felt it too. Mothers hushed their children without knowing why. Men looked at the darkening sky and felt a cold touch on their necks. The world seemed to be waiting for something to break the silence. It was the first shadow, a shadow made not of darkness, but of quiet. It slipped between the houses and settled over the palace. No one spoke of it, but everyone knew, deep in their bones, that the long war was about to end. High on the hill, in the palace of King Priam, the torches were lit early. The light from the flames jumped and danced on the painted walls. It showed scenes of happier times, harvests, weddings, peaceful gods. But the light felt nervous tonight. It could not find a place to rest. Priam himself sat on his throne, an old man with a heavy crown. He looked at his sons, brave Hector and clever Paris. He looked at the beautiful Helen, whose face had launched 1,000 ships. He saw not heroes and a queen, but tired souls in a cage of stone. The silence from the city below was a louder message than any war cry from the Greeks outside the walls. In the temple of Apollo, the god of prophecy, the air was thick with the smell of burnt barley and myrrh. The priests had made the usual offerings. They had watched the flame on the altar. They had looked for signs in the crackle of the fire and the twist of the smoke. But the signs were confused. The smoke did not rise straight to the heavens. It coiled and spun near the ground, like a lost spirit. The sacred spring, which usually bubbled clearly, ran cloudy and slow. The priests exchanged worried glances. The gods were speaking, but their words were tangled. They were hiding the truth in a mist of possible futures. The only clear thing was a sense of an ending. We can imagine that quiet. We have all felt a version of it, the moment before bad news arrives, the pause before a door opens to change your life. That is the space where oracles speak. They do not shout in the busy market. They whisper in the terrible, perfect quiet. The first omen for Troy was not a shooting star or a cracked stone. It was this silence, a gift of a few last peaceful moments, a chance to feel the weight of what was to come before the noise of its arrival washed everything away. It was the world saying, "Remember this, remember the calm." So let us remember Troy in its calm. See the last light of the sun touching the tops of the walls with gold. See the first stars, pale and shy, appearing in the purple sky. Hear nothing but the slow beat of your own heart. This was the canvas. The quiet was the first brushstroke of the final painting. The oracle, in her secluded room, was the artist who would now add the defining lines. But for these few breaths, there was only peace, a deep, wide, and fragile peace over a city that did not know it was already a memory. The city of Troy did not know it was in its last night. It simply slept. The soldiers on the walls leaned on their spears, their eyes heavy. In the houses, families shared simple meals of bread, olives, and cheese. They spoke in low voices about the hope that the Greeks would grow tired and sail away. They talked of the fields they would replant when the war was over. These were the gentle, normal dreams of people who believe in a tomorrow. The city was not a place of fear that night. It was a place of deep, trusting sleep. A child's toy horse lay forgotten in a corner. A half-woven basket sat by a hearth. Life was paused, not ended. Look at the quiet details. A baker had left dough to rise under a cloth, ready for the morning's bread that would never be baked. A scribe had put down his stylus next to a clay tablet, mid-sentence. In the barracks, armor was stacked neatly, shields polished to a soft shine. There was order, there was care. This makes the coming dawn so much more heartbreaking. They were not ready. They were prepared for another day of siege, not for the last day of everything. Their peace was not ignorance, but faith. Faith that their walls were unbreakable. Faith that their gods were listening. Faith that heroes like Hector would always protect them. Outside the walls, the world was very different. On the plain, the Greek camp was a sea of restless points of light. 1,000 fires burned. Men did not sleep. They checked their weapons. They whispered plans. They looked at the giant, silent shape of the wooden horse they had built. It stood black against the starry sky, a strange and monstrous offering. For them, the quiet of Troy was not peace. It was a target. It was the stillness they needed to move their final piece into place. Two worlds existed side by side under the same moon. One dreaming of peace, the other crafting the weapon to shatter it forever. What is a city but its people and their small daily acts? On that final night, Troy was the smell of rising dough. It was the feel of a wool blanket. It was the sound of a father's soft snore. These are the things that wars destroy. Not just walls and kings, but the simple rhythm of life. The oracle's whisper, when it came, was not for the stones of the city. It was for the soul of this daily life. It was a message to the sleeping child, the waiting baker, the tired soldier. A message they would never consciously hear, but would feel in the sudden breaking of their world. So we hold this image, Troy asleep, not as a mighty fortress, but as a home, a collection of hearths and hopes. This is what makes the story timeless. We all have our own Troy, a place of routine and safety we believe is permanent. The oracle's lesson begins here, in the tenderness of the ordinary. Before we hear her words, we must see what her words were about. They were not about empires or glory. They were about the last quiet breath of normalcy, the final gentle sigh before history turns the page. Inside the temple's deepest room, there was a stone no one usually saw. It was part of the wall, smooth and dark. But if you looked closely in the lamplight, you could see marks. They were not big or bold. They were small lines, carved gently by a careful hand long ago. Some looked like a bird in flight. Others were simple circles with dots in the center, like stars. One looked like a gate, another like a falling tower. They were simple symbols, a quiet language from a time before writing. The priests knew they were old, but their full meaning was lost. They were like a forgotten dream carved in rock. On that last night, the flickering light from the oracle's lamp made these symbols move. The bird seemed to flutter. The star circles pulsed softly. The gate looked as if it might open. The stone itself seemed to breathe. It was as if the ancient carvings were waking up for one final message. They held a story older than Priam, older than the war. A story about cycles, about cities that rise, shine for a while, and then return to the earth. The symbols did not speak of one war or one king. They spoke of the pattern of all things: birth, life, fading away. What do simple shapes tell us? They tell us that people long ago saw the world in patterns. They saw the round sun and carved a circle. They saw birds fly south and return, and carved the sign for coming back. A gate could mean a beginning or an end. A tower could mean strength or a fall. The meaning is not fixed. It flows like water, taking the shape of the moment. For Troy, in that moment, the gate was closing. The tower was falling. The bird was flying away, not to return. The symbols were a map, and the city had reached its final mark. We find comfort in simple things. A circle is soft. It has no sharp edges. It is complete. The people of Troy, in their last hours, were completing a circle they did not know they were drawing. Their story had started with a promise between a prince and a goddess. Now it would end with a whisper in a dark room. The symbols on the wall were a mirror. They reflected the city's own journey from a small settlement to a great power, and now back towards the dust. The oracle, tracing the lines with her finger, was reading their silent story. So these quiet carvings are our first real clue. Before words, there were shapes. Before prophecies, there were patterns. The omen was not a sudden miracle. It was the slow, inevitable turning of a wheel that had been set in motion centuries before. The stone and its symbols were a clock, and the time was now. The whisper would give voice to what the stone had always known. It would translate the silent language of circles and lines into a truth that a human heart could understand, and a human city could not escape. On a low table in the oracle's room sat a small clay cup. It was not fancy. It had no gold or bright paint. It was the colour of wet earth, fired in a simple kiln. Its surface was smooth from years of use. It was half full of water from the sacred spring water that had run cloudy that day. The cup had been left there by a temple servant hours before. It was meant for the oracle to drink, to clear her mind. But she had not touched it. The water inside was perfectly still, a tiny, dark mirror catching the glow of the lamp. Why did she not drink? Perhaps she knew the water held the confusion of the gods. To drink it would be to take that confusion into herself. Or perhaps she was waiting. The untouched cup became its own kind of sign. It was an object of daily life, a thing for holding, for using that had been set aside. It was a pause. In that pause, everything hung in balance. The cup was between the servant's hand and the oracle's lips, between being useful and being forgotten. It was a perfect picture of Troy itself, caught between one day and the next, between war and whatever was coming. Old hands had made this cup. A potter had shaped the cool clay on a turning wheel. A fire had hardened it. Many lips had drunk from it over many years. It held the memory of countless small thirsts. Now, it held only stillness. Objects like this are the quiet witnesses to history. Swords and crowns shout, but a cup, a bowl, a worn sandal they whisper. They tell us about the people who were not kings or heroes. They tell us about dry throats, hungry bellies, tired feet. They tell us about life, not legend. Look into the still water in the cup. If you look long enough, you might see reflections, not of the room, but of possibilities. One reflection shows the cup being lifted, the water drunk, the oracle speaking a warning that saves the city. Another shows it being knocked over in a sudden rush, the water spilling like a life draining away. A third shows it simply sitting there forever, dust slowly settling on the water's skin. The cup held all these futures. It was an anchor in the present, holding fast while time flowed around it like a river. This simple object connects us across the centuries. We all know the weight of a cup in our hand, the coolness of clay, the act of waiting for a drink when we are thirsty. In that shared feeling, Troy stops being a far-off myth and becomes real. The oracle, staring at the cup, was not just a priestess reading the gods. She was a person, tired and thirsty, facing a choice, to drink from the cloudy present or to wait for a clarity that might never come. Her untouched cup is the most human of all the omens. It is the omen of hesitation, of a breath held, of a moment stretching out thin and silent before it snaps. Far across the wine-dark sea, in the rocky land of Greece, many kings had come together. They were not friends. They had argued and fought among themselves for years. But one thing united them, a promise. Long ago, they had all sworn an oath to protect the marriage of Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. When Paris of Troy took her away, that oath was broken. Now they were bound by honor or perhaps by pride to bring her back. This simple tale of a big promise is how the war began. Not with strategy, but with a word given and a word taken back. Think of these Greek kings like pieces on a game board. Agamemnon, the proud leader. His brother Menelaus, the wronged husband. Odysseus, the clever thinker. Achilles, the fierce and angry warrior. Each had their own ships, their own soldiers, their own pride. For 10 years, they lived outside Troy's walls. They grew older. Their beards grew grey. They missed their homes. The war was no longer about Helen for many of them. It was about the time they had already lost. It was about making all those years mean something. They could not sail away empty-handed. The story had to have an ending. The tale of empires is often a tale of patience running out. The Greek Empire was not a single city, but an alliance held together by a thin thread of shared purpose. That thread was fraying. The men were tired. Supplies were low. The kings knew they could not wait another 10 years. They needed one big idea, one final move to break the stalemate. That is when the cleverest of them, Odysseus, had a dream. Not a God-sent dream, but a dream of the mind, a dream of wood and hollow spaces, a dream of a gift that was not a gift. This part of the story is easy to understand. When you cannot go through a wall, you must find a way to be invited inside. The Greeks stopped trying to break the gates. They started to think about the hearts and minds inside. They knew the Trojans were faithful, they loved their gods, they believed in signs and offerings, so the Greeks built an offering, a giant wooden horse, an animal sacred to Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes. They made it beautiful and hollow. They filled the hollow with men. Then they pretended to sail away. It was a story within a story, a lie wrapped in the shape of a holy gift. The easy tale of the big empire's last plan shows us something important. The end of Troy did not come from a stronger army. It came from a better story. The Greeks told a story the Trojans wanted to believe, that the gods had finally granted them victory, that their enemies had given up. It was a story of relief, of peace earned. The Trojans, desperate for that relief after 10 hard years, chose to believe the story over the evidence of their own eyes. The real omen was not just the oracle's whisper. It was the collective wish of a tired city to believe the war was over. That wish was the crack in the wall, long before the horse ever touched the gate. Long before the war, when the world was new, the gods made promises to men. These stories were whispered by firelight for generations. One myth tells of a wedding. All the gods were invited except one, Eris, the goddess of discord. Angry, she threw a golden apple into the feast. On it were the words, "For the fairest." 3 goddesses fought over it. They asked a young shepherd, Paris of Troy, to judge. Each offered him a bribe. Athena offered wisdom and victory in war. Hera offered power and kingdoms. Aphrodite offered the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose love. He chose Aphrodite. And so Helen was promised to him. This forgotten myth is not just a story about beauty. It is a story about choice. Every choice has a consequence, like a stone dropped in a pond. Paris's choice for love made Athena and Hera angry. They became enemies of Troy. The promise of the apple led to the breaking of the marriage oath. One story tangled into another. Myths are like that. They are the deep old roots of the tree, whose branches are the events we call history. The fall of Troy was not an accident. It was, in the myth, the result of a choice made on a sunny hillside long ago. People back then saw the world through these stories. A storm was not just weather, it was the anger of Poseidon. A lucky escape was the hand of Athena. Their history and their myths were woven together like threads in a cloth. You could not pull one thread without unraveling the other. For them, the oracle's whisper would not have been a strange mystery. It would have been part of the story. The next line in a song that had been sung since the time of the golden apple. The gods were simply finishing what they had started. We whisper these myths now to understand their hearts. They believed in forces bigger than themselves. They believed that human lives were part of a grand, often tragic, story written by the gods. This belief gave meaning to suffering. It was not random, it was fate. It was Moira. The myth of the broken promise made the 10 years of war make sense. It was the price that had to be paid. The oracle's role was to remind them of the price, to connect their present pain back to that original, fateful choice. So as we drift closer to the whisper, remember the old story, remember the apple, the choice, the angry goddesses. The whisper in the dark temple is the echo of that ancient discord. It is the final note of a song that began at a wedding feast. The people of Troy, in their bones, knew this song. They had heard it all their lives. When the oracle finally spoke, she would not be telling them something new. She would be reminding them of the story they were already in. She would be naming the chapter they were about to live, the chapter titled The Reckoning. The wind carries voices. On that night, if you listened very closely, you might have heard more than the silence of Troy. From across the mountains and the sea, other oracles were speaking. In Delphi, high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the Pythia sat over a crack in the earth. Strange vapours rose from the stone. She spoke in riddles for kings who asked about battles and futures. Her words that season were said to be dark, speaking of a great wooden tomb and laughter that turns to weeping. Far away, in Thebes, another seer watched the flight of birds. He saw a flock suddenly split in two, one half flying towards the sea, the other crashing into a high wall. These stories from far lands were not connected by messengers on horses. They were connected by something the ancients called the pneuma, the breath of the world, the spirit that flows through all things. They believed that when a great event was coming, the web of fate would vibrate. Sensitive souls everywhere, the oracles, the poets, the dreamers, would feel that vibration. They would each sing their piece of the song in their own place, in their own way. The fall of a city like Troy sent ripples through the world's soul long before the first stone fell. Join these distant whispers together. Delphi speaks of deception and reversal. Thebes speaks of division and a fatal choice. A seer in Egypt might have recorded a dream of a burning city in the north. These are not separate prophecies. They are facets of one large, unfolding truth. Like blind people touching different parts of an elephant, each oracle described what they felt. One felt the smooth, hard tusk of Greek cunning. Another felt the rough, wide side of Trojan steadfastness. Another felt the terrible, destined fall. Together, they were describing the beast of war. For us, this is a gentle reminder that no one is ever truly alone in their fate. What happens in one place echoes in another. The worry of a king in Greece touched the dreams of a priest in Egypt. The silence in Troy resonated in the vapours of Delphi. We are all part of a vast invisible net. When one knot tightens, the whole net shifts. The people of Troy, in their isolated city, were at the centre of a net that stretched across the known world. They did not hear the distant whispers. but the whispers were about them. So as we prepare to hear the one whisper from the one oracle in Troy, let us hold the others in our minds. They form a chorus, a sad, beautiful chorus from the edges of the world, singing about an event they could feel but not stop. It makes the moment more peaceful, in a way. It was not a random accident. It was a note in a universal harmony, however tragic. The Trojan oracle was not the only voice that night. She was simply the one standing at the very center of the song, about to sing the final, quiet word. Look up. The sky over Troy that night was a vast dark bowl dusted with silver. There were no city lights to wash out the stars. Every pinprick of light was sharp and clear. The people knew these stars. They had names for the patterns: the great bear, the hunter, the swan. They believed the stars were not just lights, but stories. They were gods and heroes placed in the sky for eternity. The calm, steady turning of these patterns was the most reliable thing in their world. Seasons changed, kings died, but the stars returned, night after night, year after year. On this particular night, the planets were in certain positions. We know this now from astronomy, the science of stars. Back then they called it astrology, the study of how stars influence life on Earth. Priests would track the wanderers Mars, Venus, Jupiter across the fixed background of stars. They believed that when Mars, the red planet of war, stood close to the constellation of the Scorpion, it was a time of great danger and potential betrayal. On the final night of Troy, the sky was telling its own story of an ending, a story written in light millions of miles away. There is a deep peace in looking at an old, calm sky. It reminds us how small our worries are, how brief our lives are compared to the slow dance of the cosmos. A Trojan soldier looking up at the stars might feel his fear lessen. He was part of something huge and beautiful and eternal. The same stars shone on his home, on the Greek camp, on lands he would never see. The sky was a shared roof over all the conflict. In its quiet patterns, there was no war, no Troy, no Greece. There was only balance and light and infinite space. What does the sky show us about omens? It shows that signs are often not dramatic. They are shifts in patterns, a star that seems slightly dimmer, a planet moving into a new house, the smoke from the altar that does not rise right. These are subtle changes in the normal order. The oracle was an expert in reading these subtle shifts. She could feel when the music of the spheres was off by a single note. The silent sky was her score, and on that night she heard a chord resolve towards a final, somber key. So let us look up with her, see the cool, clear beauty of that ancient night, feel the immense quiet of the universe. In that quiet, the fate of one city is both everything and nothing. It is the central drama of a world and a fleeting speck under timeless lights. The oracle's whisper, when it comes, will be a human-sized translation of this cosmic story. It will take the vast, silent truth of the stars and turn it into words small enough for a human heart to hold and heavy enough for a city to bear. Close your eyes. Feel the air around you. Is it still or does it move? The people of long ago felt more than air. They felt forces, unseen currents that move through the world and through them. They called these forces the gods, or spirits, or Moira fate. They believed that every rock, every tree, every breath of wind was alive with a kind of consciousness. A hidden energy connected all things. When an oracle went into a trance, she was not just guessing. She was tuning herself, like a harp string, to vibrate with these hidden forces. She was listening to the world's soul. These forces were not scary. They were simply part of life, like gravity is for us. You cannot see gravity, but you know it is there when you drop something. They knew the force of Apollo was there, in the healing warmth of the sun. They felt the force of Poseidon, in the power of the earthquake and the wave. The force of Ares was in the heat of battle rage, and the force of the fates was in the unchangeable path of a life, from birth to death. Troy was caught in a convergence of these forces. The tension could be felt in the silent air, in the confused temple smoke, in the very stones of the street. What does it mean to feel a hidden force? It is a deep knowing, a gut feeling, a sense that events are moving in a certain direction, pushed by a tide too large to see. The Trojans that night felt a collective dread. It was not a thought, it was a feeling in the body, a tightness in the chest, a chill without a breeze. This was their human sensitivity to the shifting forces. The oracle, trained and gifted, felt it 1,000 times more strongly. For her, it was not a vague dread, it was a clear message, a pressure forming into distinct words in her mind. We have all felt whispers of this, though we may call it intuition, a feeling that you should not take a certain path, a sudden thought of a person just before they call, a dream that feels more real than a dream. These are tiny connections to the web of hidden forces. The ancients paid great attention to these whispers. They believed they were clues from the gods, signs to be read. In our busy, loud world, we often ignore them. But on a quiet night in Troy, with the world holding its breath, those whispers became the only thing worth listening to. So the stage is set not just with people and objects, but with energy. A city is a living thing, and it was radiating a final, sad frequency. The Greek camp hummed with a different energy tense, anticipatory, sharp. Between them, the plain held a neutral quiet, like the moment between lightning and thunder. The oracle sat at the epicenter. She was the receiver. All the hidden forces, the anger of the gods from the old myth, the patient malice of the Greek plan, the weary resignation of Troy, were flowing into her quiet room. They were gathering, condensing, preparing to become sound, to become the whisper. Where does truth end and myth begin? For the people of Troy, there was no line. The truth was the myth, living and breathing in their temples and their stories. The wooden horse was both a real, physical trick and a symbol of Poseidon's power. Helen was both a real woman and the embodiment of Aphrodite's gift. The oracle's whisper would be both a human voice and the voice of Apollo himself. They lived in a world where the material and the spiritual were mixed together like water and wine. You could not separate them. This gentle mixing is not ignorance. It is a different way of knowing. It is knowing with the heart and the spirit, not just the eyes and the mind. When archaeologists today dig up Troy, they find real things: arrowheads, broken pottery, layers of fire. This is the truth of stone and bone. But the stories of the Iliad, the myths of the gods, the prophecy of the oracle, this is the truth of meaning. It tells us why the arrow was fired, why the pot was broken, why the fire burned. Both truths are needed. The facts are the skeleton, the myth is the soul. The oracle stood at the very center of this mix. She was a bridge. On one side was the tangible world, the feel of the cool stone floor, the smell of the oil lamp, the dryness in her throat. On the other side was the intangible world, the pressure of fate, the voices of the gods, the vision of futures. Her job was to translate, to take the wild, chaotic language of the divine and turn it into words that kings and soldiers could understand. Her whisper would be the point where absolute truth met human understanding. For us, listening now, this offers a kind of freedom. We do not have to choose between history and legend. We can hold both. We can see the strategic genius of the wooden horse and feel its mythic power as a symbol of deceptive gifts. We can understand the geopolitical causes of the war and feel the tragic beauty of the story of Paris and the apple. The oracle's message works on both levels. It was a practical warning about a specific danger, and it was a poetic statement about the nature of destiny itself. So, as we approach the moment of the whisper, let your mind be soft. Do not ask, is this real or is this a story? Let it be both. Let the truth and the gentle myth blend in your mind, just as they did in the minds of the Trojans. In that blended space, the whisper makes perfect sense. It is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a feeling to be received, a truth that is too big for facts alone, and so must be carried in a story, in a symbol, in a quiet voice in the dark. Imagine a thread, a single, thin, strong thread. Now imagine it stretches across time, from a moment long ago to this moment right now. The ancients saw history this way. They saw lines of family, from father to son, lines of promise, from oath to consequence, lines of prophecy, from utterance to fulfillment. The fall of Troy was not a single event. It was a point where many of these long lines finally crossed. The line from the judgment of Paris, the line from the oath of the Greek kings, the line from the building of the walls, the line from the oracle's birth, all converging on one dark hour. See these lines not as straight, but as threads in a tapestry. They weave over and under each other for years, for generations. Sometimes they are hidden on the backside of the cloth. Then, at a certain point, they all come to the front together, to form a clear picture. The picture they formed on the tapestry of that age was a city in flames. Every choice, every prayer, every act of courage or foolishness was a stitch in that picture. The people living it could only see the single stitch they were making. The oracle, perhaps, could see the emerging pattern. What does it mean to see the lines? For the oracle, it might have been a vision of connections. She might have seen the face of Paris as a young shepherd, then the face of Helen on a ship, then the face of Agamemnon on a throne, then the face of a soldier inside a wooden horse, all linked. She might have felt the weight of 10 years of war, but also the 100 years of Troy's rise, the 1,000 years of stories before that. Time itself was a line, and the city was at the very end of its particular segment. We all live on such lines, though we seldom think of it. You are here because of a long line of choices and chances that led to your birth. Your life is a thread being woven into a larger tapestry you cannot see. The Trojans' belief in fate was a comfort. It meant their suffering was not meaningless. It was part of a design. The crossing of the lines was not chaos, but a moment of terrible, beautiful clarity. Everything that had ever happened was leading to this. To the quiet in the streets, to the waiting horse, to the untouched cup, to the breath in the oracle's lungs before she spoke. So the whisper, when it comes, will be the verbal knot that ties all these lines together. It will be the statement that makes sense of the crossroads. It will not be a warning to change course, the lines are too set for that. It will be an explanation, a gentle, sad explanation of why the threads had to cross here and now and in this way. It is the pattern recognizing itself, the tapestry saying its own name. So what did these crossing lines mean? To the Greek mind, they meant Moira was fulfilled. Moira was your portion, your lot in life, your destined path. It was not a punishment. It was simply what was. A great hero had a great Moira. A city like Troy had a glorious and then a tragic Moira. The lines were the visible signs of that destiny playing out. The priests read the signs in everything, in the flight of birds, augury, in the organs of sacrificed animals, haruspicy, in dreams, in strange weather. Each sign was a clue to how the threads were weaving together. The confused smoke in the temple meant the god's will was obscured but present. The still water in the cup meant a pause in the flow of events. The silent city meant the normal hum of life had stopped, allowing the deeper pattern to be heard. The position of the stars provided the cosmic backdrop for the human drama. Each of these was a word in a sentence. The oracle's job was to be the grammarian, to put the words in the right order so the sentence made sense. The sentence would explain the meaning of the crossing. The meaning, in its simplest form, was this: a cycle was complete. Troy had been born, had grown strong, had stood against the world for 10 years. Now, its time was up. Just as a day must end in night, just as a summer must end in autumn, a city's power must eventually wane and fall. This was not a moral judgment. It was a natural law. The Greeks saw it in their own stories. Mycenae would fall one day too. The lines meant that the great wheel of time had turned to a certain point. Resistance was not just futile, it was unnatural. For the people inside, this meaning was both terrible and comforting. Terrible, because it meant loss and death. Comforting, because it meant their struggle had dignity. They were not losing because they were weak or wrong. They were fulfilling their role in a story much bigger than themselves. Their courage, their love for their city, their final night of peace, these were the noble notes in the closing chord of their song. The oracle's whisper would affirm this. It would not say, "You have failed." It would say, "Your part is done." Understanding this changes how we hear the coming whisper. It is not a scream of alarm. It is a murmured acknowledgement, a quiet yes to the inevitable. In that yes, there is a strange kind of peace. There is release. There is the end of uncertainty. The long, tense weight of 10 years of siege, and the sharper weight of this last, silent night, all of it finds its resolution in the meaning of the crossed lines. The wait is over. The story has reached its last page. Now, it only needs to be read aloud. Now, let us draw the soft picture links. See the wooden horse outside the walls. Now see the symbol of the horse carved on the temple stone from long ago. A link. See the untouched cup of water. Now see the sacred spring that ran cloudy. A link. See the silent city. Now see the still starry sky above it. A link. See the oracle's still form. Now see the sleeping child in its home. A link. Each part of this night is connected to another, not by cause and effect, but by feeling, by a shared quality of waiting, of being on the edge. These are not logical connections, they are poetic ones. They are the way a dream makes sense. In a dream, a horse can be both an animal and a feeling of fear. A cup can be both a thing to drink from and a symbol of a missed opportunity. The ancients thought in these dreamlike links. They saw the world as a vast system of symbols, where everything reflected everything else. The microcosm, the small world of the temple room, mirrored the macrocosm, the large world of the city and the stars. To understand one was to understand the other. The oracle, in her trance, was swimming in this sea of connections. She was not thinking in sentences. She was feeling in images, in sensations, in patterns of energy. The picture forming in her mind was a collage of all these links. The weight of the stone, the coolness of the water, the darkness of the horse's shadow, the warmth of the distant Greek fires, the cold points of the stars. All these sensations were merging into a single coherent understanding, a picture worth 1,000 words, which she would then have to translate into just a few. For us, this is an invitation to soften our own gaze. Do not look for the plot. Feel for the theme. The theme is ending. The theme is acceptance. The theme is the beautiful, sad rightness of a completed story. Every link you can draw, from the myth to the horse, from the silence to the stars, reinforces that theme. It is as if the universe itself was aligning all its elements to tell the same story, to create the same mood, a mood of poignant, peaceful finality. So before the words, there is this silent, linked picture. Hold it in your mind. It is more important than the specific prophecy. It is the emotional truth of the moment. A city, a culture, a way of life, poised at the very tip of the diving board. Below is the dark water of what comes next. Around it is the supportive, silent air of a universe that has seen this countless times before. The oracle is the one who feels the slight tremble in the board, the one who knows the dive is now inevitable, and she will speak that inevitability into the quiet night. Let us bring the old pictures to today. What does the last night of Troy have to do with you, lying here, listening? It has everything to do with you, because you, too, have known endings. Not of cities, but of smaller things. The end of a day, the end of a job, the end of a relationship, the end of a chapter in your life. In those moments, you may have felt a version of the Trojan quiet, the strange stillness before the change becomes real. You may have felt the weight of crossed lines, the sense of a cycle completing. You may have wished for an oracle to whisper the meaning of it all. The old pictures are mirrors. The untouched cup is your own hesitation before a difficult step. The silent city is your own mind grown quiet with worry or acceptance. The wooden horse is the deceptive gift, the thing that looks like a blessing but carries hidden danger, a mistake you welcomed in. The starry sky is the vast perspective you seek when your own problems feel too large. These stories survive not because they are about ancient kings, but because they are about us. They are maps of the human heart in times of great transition. The oracle's role is one we still seek, though we call it by other names. Therapy, meditation, journaling, talking to a wise friend, these are our modern ways of listening for the whisper. We are trying to hear the truth that is already there, beneath the noise of our daily fears and hopes. We are trying to translate the confused smoke of our emotions into a clear sentence. We are trying to find the moira, the meaning, in our own crossed lines. The Trojan oracle teaches us the value of sitting in the quiet and listening deeply, even to truths we fear. So this history is not an escape from today. It is a way into a deeper part of today. It gives shape and dignity to our own experiences of endings. It tells us that feeling a silent dread before a change is not cowardice. It is recognition. It tells us that accepting an inevitable end is not defeat. It can be a form of peace. The Trojans, in their final hours, were not just victims. They were participants in a universal human ritual, the ritual of letting go. As we near the oracle's actual words, carry this connection with you. You are not just hearing a story about them, you are hearing a story about the part of you that knows about ending, the part that seeks meaning in the silent moments before the page turns. The whisper we are about to hear is for them, yes. But in its essence, in its gentle truth about fate and acceptance, it is also a whisper for anyone who has ever waited in the dark, wondering what comes next. The air in the room grew thick, the flame of the oil lamp straightened, burning a clear, steady yellow without a flicker. The oracle's breathing, which had been slow and deep, shallowed, then stopped for a long moment. Her eyelids fluttered. When they opened, they did not see the stone walls or the lamplight. They saw through them to the weaving of the lines, to the crossing point. Her lips, dry and pale, parted, and the whisper came. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was air passing over a vocal cord, shaped by a tongue and teeth, into the simplest of sentences. This is what she said. The gift outside is empty. The real horse has already gone inside. Let the words sit in the silence they were born in. Do not rush to explain them. Feel their shape. The gift outside, that is the wooden horse, the offering left by the Greeks, is empty. Its hollow belly holds men, but in a deeper sense, it holds nothing of value. No true peace, no true victory. It is a shell, a trick, the real horse. Not the statue, but the essence of what a horse means. Speed, power, conquest. The Greek army itself has already gone inside. not through the gates, but through the cracks in faith, through the wish for the war to be over. The real force of destruction was not outside the walls. It was in the Trojans' own relieved hearts, welcoming the symbol of their doom. This was the first clear revelation, not a shout of "beware," but a quiet statement of fact. The danger was not future, it was present. The decisive moment had already passed. It passed when the Trojans decided to drag the horse inside. The oracle, in her timeless state, was not foreseeing the future. She was seeing the present with absolute clarity. She was naming a truth that everyone else was too hopeful, too tired, too desperate to see. The fall was not something that would happen. It was something that was happening in that very moment of mistaken belief. Why whisper it? Why not scream it from the temple steps? Because some truths are too heavy for shouting. They must be carried gently, or they break the one who hears them. A whisper is a gift. It allows the listener to receive the truth at their own pace, to almost pretend they did not hear it, if that is what they need. The oracle was not trying to save the city. That was impossible. The lines were crossed. She was trying to save the soul of the city, to give them a chance to understand their end, to meet it with eyes open, even if their arms were too weak to stop it. So this is the omen, not a prediction of fire and sword, a diagnosis. The patient is already dying. The fever is not the disease, it is the sign. The wooden horse is not the threat, it is the symptom. The real disease was a decade of war, of exhaustion, of a broken promise echoing through the years. The real horse, the spirit of conflict and deceit, had infected the city long ago. It was in the tiredness of the guards, the desperate hope of the people, the cloudy water of the spring. The oracle simply pointed to the infection and gave it its true name. Now we know. The whisper was not a mystery to be solved. It was a truth to be acknowledged. A gentle, devastating acknowledgement that the end begins not with a bang, but with a mistaken belief, with a sigh of relief breathed at the wrong moment, with a choice to see what you wish to see rather than what is. The Trojans, in their deepest hearts, maybe knew this already. The oracle's whisper was just the mirror held up to their own hidden knowing. It was the universe, through her, agreeing with their silent fear. Lift your eyes now from the small, dark room. Lift them past the city walls, past the plain, past the clouds. Lift them to the quiet, cosmic wonder of the universe. The stars that shone on Troy that night are, for the most part, the same stars that shine on us tonight. They have witnessed the rise and fall of countless cities, empires, species. They are silent, patient, and unimaginably old. Against that backdrop, the whisper in the temple is not a small thing. It is a human echo of a cosmic truth. All things that are born must one day die. Stars themselves are born, burn for eons, and die. It is the first and last law. The oracle's message connected that tiny, earthbound moment to this vast, eternal cycle. She was a node where human understanding touched universal law. Her real horse was not just a Greek army. It was the principle of entropy, of change, of time's arrow moving in one direction. Everything moves from order to disorder, from construction to decay. Troy, in its splendid, ordered walls, was a pocket of temporary order. The universe, in its slow, patient way, was moving to return it to disorder, to dust, to memory, to story. The whisper was the moment that universal intention became conscious in a human mind. This is not a cold, scientific fact. It is a wonder. It is awe. To feel, even for a second, that your personal tragedy is part of the grand choreography of existence, this can be a source of immense peace. It removes the sting of personal failure. The Trojans did not fall because they were worse than others. They fell because they were, because they existed in time. Their story was beautiful, precisely because it had an end. A song that goes on forever is not a song, it is a noise. A story without an ending is not a story, it is a description. The ending gives it shape, meaning, and power. So the cosmic wonder here is the wonder of stories themselves. The universe is telling a story through the life and death of stars, planets, and life. Human cultures are the universe's way of telling stories about itself. Troy was a sentence in that story, a tragic, heroic, memorable sentence. The oracle was the punctuation mark, the period at the end of the sentence. She gave the sentence its finality, its completion, and in doing so she allowed the story to move on to the next sentence, the next civilization, the next chapter in the long, long book of being. As you lie there, feel this expansion. Let your worries of the day be small against this starry backdrop. Let your own personal endings be seen as necessary punctuation in your own story. They are not mistakes. They are periods, commas, maybe even chapter breaks. They give your life its shape, its rhythm, its meaning. The Trojan oracle, in her ultimate moment, understood this. Her whisper was not a cry against fate. It was a gentle nod to it, a recognition that she and her city were playing their part in something too large to comprehend, but beautiful enough to accept. Watch now, not with worry, but with soft understanding, as history repeats in gentle circles. The fall of Troy was not the first city to fall. Great Jericho had its walls come down. Mighty Babylon would be conquered. Knossos, Mycenae, Rome, all would know their zenith and their dusk. The pattern is a circle, not a line. A civilization is born from the earth, grows like a tree, flowers gloriously, then slowly loses its leaves, returns its nutrients to the soil, so that new seeds may grow. Troy was one turn of this endless, soft wheel. The Trojans themselves knew this pattern in their myths. They told stories of older races, the Titans, the giants who were overthrown by the gods. They knew that even the gods were not forever. They had a sense of deep time, of eras succeeding each other. Their own end, when it came, would simply be their turn in the cycle. This knowledge is what separates a tragic fall from a meaningless disaster. Tragedy has pattern, meaning, and a kind of beauty. It is the beauty of autumn leaves, of a sunset, of a final, perfect note in a song. See the repeating circles in smaller ways too. The cycle of a single life, childhood, strength, old age, death. The cycle of a day, dawn, noon, dusk, night. The oracle's day was ending, the city's long day was ending. The Greeks' 10-year night of camping outside was ending. All these small circles were closing at the same time, synchronized by the larger circle of the city's fate. It is a harmony of endings, a convergence of cycles that creates a moment of profound stillness and change. For us, this is a lesson in peace. If our own lives are part of cycles, and they are then, our endings are not failures, they are completions. The end of a job completes your time there. The end of a relationship completes that chapter of your heart. The end of a day completes its opportunities and rests its labors. Resistance to the end of a cycle causes suffering. Acceptance brings peace. The Trojans, in their best moments, accepted their role in the great story. Their final night was a masterclass in the peaceful completion of a cycle, even if the dawn would bring violence. So we watch the circle close around Troy. The stone circle carved in the temple, the circular rim of the untouched cup, the circular walls of the city, the circular path of the stars overhead. All these circles were coming to a close. The whisper was the sound of the circle clicking shut, a soft, final sound, not a crash, but a sigh. The sigh of something finished, whole, and ready to be returned to the source from which it came, to history, to memory, to myth. The whisper opened a door, not a door to escape, but a door to understanding, a door to hidden knowledge. What is this knowledge? It is the knowledge that the most important truths are often the quietest, that the real battle is not outside, but inside our own perceptions, that a gift can be empty, and the real danger can be the thing we have already welcomed in without knowing. This is not secret knowledge for priests. It is human wisdom, won through suffering and observation. The oracle simply gave it words at the right moment. Hidden knowledge is not about magic spells or lost treasures. It is about seeing the connections that are always there, but usually ignored. It is about recognizing that your relief at a problem seeming to vanish might be the very sign that the problem has taken a new, more dangerous form. It is about understanding that walls, no matter how strong, cannot protect against the enemy that is already within, be it doubt, deception, or despair. Troy's walls were physical. The real horse was psychological and spiritual. The hidden knowledge was how to see one in the other. This knowledge also includes the understanding of timing. There is a time to fight, a time to wait, and a time to accept. The hidden knowledge is knowing which time it is. The Trojans had fought for 10 years. They had waited through this last silent night. The oracle's whisper was the signal that the time for acceptance had come. Not acceptance of defeat by the Greeks, but acceptance of the completion of their story. This is a profound and peaceful kind of knowledge. It ends the internal war, even as the external one reaches its climax. For us, the door remains open. We can walk through it whenever we face an ending. We can ask, what is the gift outside that I am focusing on? The new job, the new relationship, the external solution. What is the real horse that has already gone inside? The old pattern, the hidden fear, the belief that is dooming me. The oracle's framework is a tool for self-inquiry. It helps us look past the obvious, tempting story to the deeper, quieter truth of our situation. That is the hidden knowledge she offers across the centuries. So the whisper was not an end. It was a beginning of understanding. It was the key that unlocked the door to seeing the situation as it truly was, not as they wished it to be. In that clear seeing, there is a terrible freedom, the freedom that comes when all illusions are gone, and only the bare, beautiful, tragic truth remains. That truth is hard, but it is clean. It has no false hopes to disappoint you. It asks only for your courage to look at it, and your grace to bow before its inevitability. This is the final, quiet gift of the oracle. We have climbed the long hill of this night, through silence and symbols, myths and stars. Now we reach the peaceful high point. This is not a point of action or decision. Those are past. This is the point of view. From here, you can see the whole landscape of the story. You can see the long lines that led here. You can see the circles closing. You can feel the hidden forces at rest, their work done. You can understand the whisper not as a warning, but as a benediction, a soft word of release for a city that had carried its burden for 10 years and could now, finally, put it down. The high point is in the heart. It is the moment when fear turns into sadness, and sadness turns into acceptance, and acceptance turns into a deep, quiet peace. The Trojans, in their final hours, may have touched this peace. The soldier on the wall, looking at the stars, might have felt it. The mother, holding her sleeping child, might have felt it. The oracle, after the whisper left her lips, certainly felt it. The hard work was over. The truth was spoken. Nothing was left to do but to be present for the last moments of a world. This peace is not passive. It is the most active state of all. Full consciousness without resistance. It is seeing the fire coming and not running, but watching the beauty of the flames. It is hearing the crash of the wall and not screaming, but listening to the music of the falling stones. It is a poetic, almost mystical state where the soul aligns completely with reality, however harsh. In that alignment, there is no conflict. There is only experience. Pure, poignant, fleeting experience. For us, listening, this is the goal of the story. Not to make us sad about Troy, but to show us that peace is possible even at the edge of the end. If they could find it facing the destruction of their entire world, perhaps we can find it facing our smaller endings. The peaceful high point is always available. It is the moment we stop arguing with what is. We stop wishing the past were different. We stop fearing the future. We simply rest in the present, with all its joy and all its pain, and say, "This is what is, and it is enough." So let us rest here, on this high point, with Troy spread out below in the moonlight, quiet and still. Let us breathe the cool, pre-dawn air. Let our heartbeats slow to match the slow turning of the earth. The story is almost over. The last page is about to turn. But before it does, there is this perfect, peaceful pause. A silence more profound than the silence that began the night. A silence filled not with dread, but with understanding. A silence that is itself the answer to all the questions the war had asked. This is the gift. Not salvation, but serenity. And so we come to the close. The whisper has been heard, not in the streets, but in the soul of the night. The high point of peace has been reached. Now, soothing answers settle like dust. The answer to what will happen to Troy is simple. It will fall. But that is not the important answer. The important answer is to why did this happen, and what does it mean? The soothing answer is it happened because all stories end. It means that endings are not punishments, but completions. They are the period that gives the sentence before it meaning. The Trojan story meant courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It meant love for home and family. It meant the tragic cost of a broken promise. It meant the danger of believing the story you want to believe. These are eternal human lessons wrapped in the epic of a city's fall. The soothing answer is that Troy did not die for nothing. It died to become a story, to become a mirror for every person who has ever stood against a long siege, whether of an army or of hard times. Its fall was its transformation from a place of stone to a place of meaning. But a gentle story never ends with just an answer. It ends with one last, lingering question, a question to carry into your dreams. So here is ours, left hanging in the quiet air after the whisper. What if the oracle's message was not for the city to hear, but for us, listening across time? What if her whisper about the real horse already inside is a perennial warning about the enemies we welcome into our own hearts, complacency, false hope, the refusal to see hard truths? What if the true fall of Troy happens again and again, in small ways, inside each of us, whenever we ignore the quiet whisper of our own inner oracle? This question is not meant to trouble you. It is meant to float gently, like a feather on a still pond. Let it drift in your mind. There is no need to answer it now. Perhaps the answer will come in a dream or in a quiet moment tomorrow. The question is the bridge between their world and yours. It is the thread that connects your breath now to the breath of the oracle then. Both are breaths taken in the dark, facing unknowns, seeking peace. So we leave the plains of Troy, not in the roar of fire, but in the gentle glow of moonlight on broken stones. The answer we found is not a shout, but a sigh. The oracle's whisper was perhaps not a warning to be feared, but a key to be accepted. A soft release for a city whose story was already written in the stars. It asks us a kinder question. What if knowing the future is not a curse, but a chance to meet our end with grace? Close your eyes now. Let the images fade the quiet streets, the temple smoke, the silent horse. Let them all soften into a single peaceful feeling. The ruins are not sad, they are asleep. And so, now, can you be? Let go of the day, sweet dreams. Breathe deep. Let the story of Troy and its whispered omen settle gently in your mind. If this journey to a quiet, ancient night helped you find a moment of peace, share that gift. Pass this story to a friend who carries their own weight, who needs a gentle escape into the deep past. Leave a soft word in the comments below, a thought, a feeling, a memory it sparked. Your voice joins the long, quiet conversation of history. And as you close this page, remember to be kind to your own spirit. May your rest be long, deep, and unbroken. So we leave the plains of Troy, not in the roar of fire, but in the gentle glow of moonlight on broken stones. The answer we found is not a shout, but a sigh. The oracle's whisper was perhaps not a warning to be feared, but a key to be accepted. A soft release for a city whose story was already written in the stars. It asks us a kinder question. What if knowing the future is not a curse, but a chance to meet our end with grace? Close your eyes now. Let the images fade, the quiet streets, the temple smoke, the silent horse. Let them all soften into a single, peaceful feeling. The ruins are not sad, they are asleep. And so, now, can you be? Let go of the day. Sweet dreams.